White Rabbit, I want us to maybe kick this off with just you very shortly giving your background, how you got into historical NFT collecting, and then we're just going to kind of nerd out over the history of the last decade or so in NFTs.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Oh, look. So it's funny when you look back. So I got into the blockchain space in 2017. Came in that school. Written it since then. I got into the reason I got into NFTs was when I got into the crypto side, and obviously started with the big ones, and then started to just when you just literally fall down that rabbit hole and you just spend hours trying to understand what is this technology, what is this crazy space and this amazing space, and just trying to get your head around it. And it's also foreign and the UI is so terrible, and this crazy stuff when you send these little things around and you don't know if they're going to arrive, and it went down deep. And pretty soon in that process, one of the things that really grabbed my attention was the concept of digital assets in gaming. I just sort of thought right from the start that makes sense to me, that value proposition, that to what's something that's out there. I started to learn about a couple of projects in that space. And at the time, one of them was Engine, which was doing something pretty unique, and we're pretty cutting edge, and they pre-existed before crypto and blockchain was going on in terms of this sort of work. And so they weren't just sort of a flash in the pan that came up. Um, and they were the authors of the ERC 1155 that obviously has become a pretty contemporary standard with some of this stuff. But so through that, I sort of got this concept of what NFTs in a digital asset sense could mean, and then I pretty quickly moved on, because then people started to create a whole bunch of NFTs, and they were starting to have this sort of little trade thing going on in their little ecosystem. And I started to just get a sense of, man, if this does go big, and if this company goes big and all that sort of stuff, then maybe the very first ones would probably make sense to me. They might actually have some value, that just makes sense from an in real life collecting concept. But I was in this very little ecosystem. I didn't have any understanding of what had come before it, or I pretty much thought they were just making it all up as they went, and there was nothing before it. And it was in that process, and this is before obviously NFTs had gone off its nuts and everyone was interested. And, this is all still a very niche little thing. It's niche now, but it was like non-existent then. Um, and it was only then as I started to just sort of zoom out, broaden my view, I guess. And this is where I often say that a maxi of any kind is really only hurting themselves. In my view, I think if it doesn't matter what sort of maxi you are, if you're a maxi, all you're doing is ultimately drawing a line and saying, I refuse to learn or innovate any further, or believe in any innovation any further than right where I am right now. And then you deliberately block off new information and things. So I sort of, it was one of those things where I was pretty maxi on that project at the time, and I still love the project. I still think it's amazing. But I did also then broaden my view and go, hang on, I need to look a bit beyond this. And that's when I just discovered, actually there was stuff that went on before what these guys are doing. And that's where, for those that have been around for a while, you may be familiar with the OpenSea Bible. That was a very early document that was written, which I came across, which was pretty cool, because it talked about some of the earlier stuff, but it made fleeting references to where it came from. The fleeting references at the time was CryptoPunks, and they made a very small reference to rare peppies, but almost as if they were mythological and didn't exist. It was like I didn't know they were accessible, or even at that point. Um, and but that was enough for me to go. And I'd heard this thing about CryptoPunks, and I'd heard it mentioned here or there, or now and again. But you know how it's one of those things, and you always kick yourself later, where you hear stuff and you never bother to actually look. You sort of, oh yeah, I know about that. It's a bit like Bitcoin. Most of us like heard about Bitcoin and was mulling around for a while and never really bothered to look at it until you go back and go, damn, I wish the very first time I heard that word mentioned, I actually went and had a look at it. So that's sort of what happened with this. And thankfully got into punks pretty early. They were sort of just around about 1/8 at the time, and again, no one's paying too much attention, no one's interested in NFTs. So it was one of those things going, if these, and they were being promoted as the first at the time. So this is again when that whole narrative was there. These were the very first. These are the first NFTs ever. And I was going, well, damn, if these were the first, maybe in about 50 years they might be worth something when this whole big, things happened and the world's changed and we're in this whole digital space. So maybe I should get a few of these things. And so even at the time, when you're paying an ETH, I think ETH was maybe 600 bucks at the time or something, I can't remember. um, you still spend a bit of money on this stuff, on these little pictures. So I bought a few of them, and admittedly, I didn't tell my wife at the time. I didn't quite know how I was going to explain that to her. So I just bought a few, and then it was probably within, I don't know, it was within about 6 months, of that things started to go a bit insane, and things really took off. So I guess what I thought would be, maybe 20, 50 years happened in sort of 6 months. We're in a different time frame here. And so that's sort of how I got into the space. And then it's a bit, I guess, more of a story than how I discovered after that yes, CryptoPunks were really significant and played an important role, but damn, they weren't the first, and there was some really significant innovation that happened before that.
Awesome. Yeah, really appreciate you sharing that story there. Behind us right now is your timeline. If you can kind of see, this is a pretty iconic picture. This is red pilled. Few people, you could say you kind of red pilled me before this came out, actually, just over DMs. But yeah, your Medium article was released with this timeline image, and what's very interesting about this, and this is very important to realize, for a nice period of time there, people were really only, for the most part, like the mainstream historical NFT space was only interested in assets on Ethereum. And a combination of White Rabbit going around and educating people, and just this like emblem vault technology that allows you to wrap assets from other blockchains and put it on Ethereum. The combination of these two things is what led to basically people going down the rabbit hole on all of these other blockchains, right? That came before, and all these other experiments, and just early kind of just moments in time. Like there's entire little movements that happened on Counterparty that was a moment, and then that moment kind of closed, but it was a very unique thing. And we're going to go back and talk about these moments and try to understand the way these people would have been thinking at the time. But yeah, this is definitely something I would recommend referencing after the space if you want to like learn more. White Rabbit's bio has just a link in there to this Medium article, and it's very well worth a read, in my opinion. Um, with that, I think like I'm a fan of like probably just moving into the walking around the museum. We're gonna go through chronologically here pretty soon. But White Rabbit, I want to see, is there anything else you wanted to kind of share, just high level, about the history of NFTs here that you think is important to set up this conversation before we just start back in 2011 walking through the museum?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Leo. Oh yeah, we had some fun in those early days when we were talking before, yeah, before the timelines were out. Now I remember us when we first talked, going, "Oh yeah, I'm working on a bit of a timeline," and I said, "Oh yeah, I've been putting a bit together as well." These are the early days, and the funniest the funniest thing we had going on at the time, if you remember, when we first met, we met basically and connected over rocks and DZs. this was the this was
Yeah,
the story back. It
yeah,
was too funny. I don't
yeah,
I think it's a story worth telling, I reckon, Leo.
yeah, yeah. I mean, do you
It's
want to tell it? You want to tell it, or?
yeah, yeah, look, feel free to put in, but I was, so as I was starting to look around at this history and the stuff that had gone on, and I was looking at, a couple of timelines, like Harry BTC had a sort of high level timeline that came out first, which was really
100%.
cool,
This
and
is
stuff.
the OG timeline, guys. You don't
Yeah,
see this one
yeah.
around as much anymore, but this was like the timeline for like a several month period.
Yeah, and that was cool, and it started to mark out particularly some of these uh, okay, someone's having trouble with sound. Hopefully not everyone. I'll leave that to the tech guys. But yeah, so there were some of these F1s that started to appear, and on these timelines, and Harry BTC had a few of that. And he also then did reference Counterparty and BTC as a sort of a broader thing, which was the sort of the first time that was starting to get out there, which was awesome to see. Um, and because there was a whole community still in that, rare peppies and spells and other things going on, but they sort of were disconnected to what was happening in the NFT sort of, euphoria sort of starting bit that was happening on around. And then Leo was, had put out his timeline, and I saw a bunch of these other ones there, and one of them was these DZs, which I hadn't heard of these DZs, didn't know what they were, and I'd heard of pretty much all the others, but that was the one going, what the heck's that, and I had to sort of Google and look and try and get around, and it's always one of those things you try and get to early because if too many people discover them, they'll be out of reach, and and at the time, it was around the same time that the whole rocks did its thing, as well. And that was when, I just happened to be driving along. I think I was dropping some kids off at school or something, and I just heard I was listening to something or saw some tweet just before I left saying that these rocks from 2017 were had been rediscovered, were there, and people were sort of making a bit of fun of it. And I saw the Gary Vee had tweeted something about it and other things, and I just, for me, it was just a case of the fact that I was collecting anything now at this point before, basically anything before CryptoPunks, anything that was significant and historical or anything around, I think they came just after CryptoPunks, but anything around that 2017 and earlier, I was collecting. And so I thought, oh, well, if they're still around when I get back to my desk, I might try and to get a couple of those or something. And so I ended up being able to get a rock and stuff, and but then also I, when I was looking, so I had that, and then I was going, what's this DZs thing? And so that's when I got in touch with Leo. I was looking around for DZs. I came across Leo's name. We started conversing, and basically we had this situation, this almost a rock DZ standoff, and I was going, oh man, I've
We were both too, yeah, we were too in love with our assets, but we also wanted the other asset, and we both wanted a deal so bad. Like we were
well,
both
this is it.
investors that wanted a deal. If we were gonna trade, we wanted a deal, and we went
Yeah.
back and forth what 5 different times.
We totally do. I basically almost, if you could in real life handshake, I'd be pretty much set Leo up to say because I managed to grab two rocks at the time. They hadn't gone to the millions at that point or anything like that. They were being valued, but they weren't crazy value at that point. And same with DZs. So for those who don't know DZs, digital zones, there's some good stuff Leo will talk about that out at some point around that. But that's one of the things I think in the museum here as well. But Michael Chan, amazing early innovator artist that did this art, and and so I'd sort of said, look, all right, because I managed to grab two rocks, and I said, okay, I'm going to swap you, Leo, for a rock for a DZ, and let's do that. And then, like, between the time of saying it and then like almost doing it, I'm going, man, I'm just, I don't know, these rocks, people are getting a bit more attention. I'm not sure, and Leo's sort of like going, "Oh no, that's cool, man. I get it. I totally get it. No, that's all good." And I felt really bad because I was like pretty much set up for a trade at that point, and Leo was like, "Nah, that's cool," because he obviously really wanted it. And I said to him, "Look, total heads off to you, man. That's cool, because I didn't know you from a bar of soap, and I thought, this guy's going to go full dark, angry mode because he really wants his trade, I've got cold feet on it." And you responded really nicely. I thought, oh, that's cool, man. This guy's all right then, because like we were pretty close to that. And then between then and over the next week or two, we were oscillating, going, do I still want this DZ? Oh, maybe I do. And I think at one point you were even offering two DZs for a rock, and because the values of them were like going insane, stupid at the time in different ways. And so eventually we got to the point where we ended up doing swapping a different asset at the end of the day. But that was sort of the start then when we got into it, and this stuff was just starting to get some attention and significance, I guess, at the time. But I don't know if you want to say anything more about that. But that was a bit of fun and a bit of craziness right at the start.
Yeah, I just remember like a bunch of people that I knew had one of these rocks, and I definitely was FOMOing and wanted one of them. And I could tell White Rabbit did want a digital zone as well. Like he
Oh
wanted
yeah,
to just for your collection. You definitely wanted it. So we
yeah,
did ultimately end up getting to kind of work something out a few weeks later. That was a good
yeah.
trade. But yeah, basically that was my experience meeting White Rabbit, a cutthroat negotiator, and I would highly recommend understanding your history before starting a negotiation with White Rabbit. Um, that that said, I think let's go ahead and dive into the museum. And the way we're gonna like structure this is, if White Rabbit and I find a collection that's interesting, we're just gonna kind of go to it and try to just talk through, basically our kind of take on like what happened there in the history to the best of our knowledge. We're just like you guys though. Like we were not there living through a lot of these moments. So we have just done research to try to understand. We've gotten to talk to many of these creators and founders and artists that we're going to see their works today, but we weren't there. So we're just interpreting the history just like y'all. So we'll try our best to answer things and try our best to contextualize everything. But yeah, and we're also gonna leave a little time to ask questions if anybody sees a here's something they don't understand. Like, please just speak up or drop a message in the chat. And if you want to ask questions as well, we'll definitely do a little Q&A around each piece. And yeah, we'll try to keep this to an hour is the goal. We'll see how well we stay to that. But yeah, White Rabbit, without further ado, you want to hop into the museum?
Yeah, can I say one thing before we do,
Yes,
just
you
to
can.
it's just that high level, just before we get into it. Firstly, just to say, yeah, really, really like what you just said. Then it's I recognise completely that we're telling the stories of these really early innovators. And there were people who they were doing this stuff when nobody cared, nobody was taking notice. They were just experimenting and pioneering. And I feel that brings certainly us a lot of joy is sharing about this stuff that people were doing that's to date, is still largely overlooked by many in this space. But this is why we do it because, personally, and I know Leo does, and many others, no doubt, in this room as well, they understand that what's happening here is massive, in terms of world-changing stuff. And I keep going back to this. This is this concept of digital assets for a digital age. It doesn't get much bigger than that. I firmly believe that we're going to be in this sort of demarcation point in the world of a pre-ownership digital world to a post-ownership digital world, and that's huge in terms of what this is all going to mean to the way we live, the way we socialize, the way economies are built. The whole metaverse will come out of this whole technology that we're talking about today and that we're all a part of. The whole metaverse and all the content creation stuff by users and new economies that will be part of that. Um, it's going to change in many, many, many things. And so it's this concept of significance to the world that this technology will have, which then means why these earliest assets that actually pioneered, that made this stuff up, that actually did this stuff right at the start before anyone was paying attention, before there was any template, before anyone was paying any attention whatsoever. There are these people and projects that just tested it out and just played and had fun, experimented, worked hard, whatever. And everything else is sort of, then there's been iterative innovation from these. And so that's for me why this stuff is really, really significant, because it's the significance of where this is going and how it's ultimately going to change the world, on a massive scale, that gives significance to these earliest innovations that laid the foundations for it all. So that's sort of I guess, the high level viewpoint of all of this sort of stuff. I don't, you know, I don't think I'm overselling what this is going to mean, and that's for me, just keeps me interested and keeps me going back to those really cool things that started it. And the beauty of it is that a lot of these projects, we're having a lot of fun at the time, and that just adds to the lore and the fun of this stuff as well. But yeah, happy to get into it, Leo, and
Yeah.
let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So let's go ahead and walk on over. If you follow us, we're gonna head on over to the first room here. So just follow along. Yeah, so I believe I'm trying to think where the first assets are here. Let's start with this .bit domain here and this puny code, guys. So to set this up, and White Rabbit, feel free to kind of jump in here. Feel free to jump in here as you have anything to say. But basically, what we're looking at right now is representations of a very early primitive of a digital object. Okay, so the idea is very simple. It's 2011, Bitcoin has been created. Okay, people want to take this blockchain technology and use it for something other than currency. They want to use it to create a decentralized DNS system. So just like we're on, simulacra.io right now, there's .coms, there's .ios, there's all these Web 2 domain systems. Somebody wanted to do that on blockchain. And this group of people created Namecoin with this specific vision, which is we're going to do DNS, but we're going to do it in a decentralized manner where you have true digital ownership over those domain names. So, what a domain name is at the end of the day, and everybody's familiar with ENS, so I don't need to go into it too much. But basically, it turns out when you create a domain name on a blockchain, what you just created is an NFT. Okay, and there's a little bit of there's nuance to it because these assets expire. Most people don't consider, if our CryptoPunks expired, I'm pretty sure people wouldn't be very happy. So these are not people who are thinking at all about how 10 years later people are going to be speculating on these as historical assets or anything like that. People literally are just saying, hey, uh, let's take blockchain technology and create domains on it. So there's this domain, the first domain ever. This is the first NFT ever, and these things are all somewhat debatable claims, by the way. But this is a pretty widely held belief that Bitcoin.bit is the first domain name, and that was April 21st, 2011, and that's kind of the birthday of NFTs, in my opinion. And we're coming up on 12 years on that moment happening here in April, which is kind of just a wild moment. So with that, White Rabbit, do you want to talk about the significance of .bit domains to you at all, and just this kind of early experiment where these guys happened to create the first NFTs, even though that's like not really what they were thinking about. They just wanted to create domain names.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. Look, and this is where I think this is a really important discussion. It's a great starting point. I totally see this space as being an evolution of digital ownership. These things, as Leo said, the people. It's important that we're able to put ourselves back in the shoes before we know when they didn't know what we know now. I think that's the hardest thing when you're looking back on this stuff. You look through a lens of what we understand and what we know now. And these guys we're not thinking, oh, we're going to build collectibles that are going to be collected and traded. This was the earliest start, but what it created was the very first experience, the very first instance of non-fungible digital ownership, um, in a form that took this form of domains, which was the Namecoin, the intention to be uncensorable. And I think this is the important discussion around this. And there's a lot of stuff that's been written about this, some great information that's out there. I think the most recent Punisher, I think I saw here before, did a great article about this. But the way I see this whole space is, for me, the Namecoin assets are a bit like the amoeba that first popped out of the lake. The single celled organism that from out of which everything else evolved. This was the first experience of digital ownership in its very, very primitive, very pure form. It didn't have all the bells and whistles that now we have on a whole lot of assets and NFTs, that sort of stuff. It was just that single celled organism that took it from being a nothing to a something. And so this is why these early Namecoin things are significant. We know that Satoshi himself contributed to the concepts around Namecoin. We have that in the Bitcoin forum chats. We know that the Vitalik's white paper, the Ethereum white paper, refers to Namecoin non-fungible assets as being these very earliest forms of non-fungible ownership. So it's had that sort of preeminence and significance. But it wasn't being done so that what we'd see now was created. It was done at a time with a different mindset and other things. And so the expiry of the assets on chain was a feature. It was deliberately built into the chain. It was not a mistake. It was they didn't want people squatting on stuff that made the whole thing unusable. They wanted to make sure that if people really wanted to be engaging with this stuff, then they had to be active. And so they created this expiry component. And so these were features, and to me, this is the joy in it. I'm a collector. I love to see where it all started, where it all came from, and this is sort of where it emerged from. Now, the debate at the moment is, what does expiry mean? Does it mean that provenance is lost when you collect it now? And that's something that I think every individual can look at, and consider on its own merits. And so there are definitely different schools of thought on it, and as I keep saying on this one, there are really, really smart people on both sides of that debate, and I do think it comes down to a matter of perspective on that issue, and that's for collectors to work out for themselves. What's not in doubt was this. This was the amoeba that popped out of the swamp. This was the very first experience of non-fungible ownership, and so for me, it makes it really significant. Again, when you consider, in 20, 30, 40 years' time, where the world will go in terms of digital ownership, the evolution started here. So it's really cool in my view.
Absolutely. A lot of people might look at this and be like, this is kind of silly. Like, why would we ever use this? We have ENS now, or yada, yada, yada. And these are all actually great points. Like, I wouldn't necessarily advocate for using maybe dot bit. Like, I think there is potentially a future there and you could build on the protocol. But I mean, if I'm going to be completely honest, it's largely a failed protocol. And most of the DNS has moved to other protocols by now, and a lot of the interest in it is simply as historical artifacts. So what you're looking at here on the right, abc.bit, this is the 71st NFT ever created. Okay, so it's the 71st domain. It was registered on that first date, April 21st. So just, I don't know, kind of appreciate what it would have been like to go onto the Namecoin blockchain and just plug in ABC, register it. I'm sure it's someone just speculating, thinking, that's probably a valuable name. I should probably own that one. Just like people wanted to own Yahoo and Bitcoin and these other popular search terms. Also, on the left here, we're going to turn our attention a little bit. So we're skipping forward a few months here. So this project's I shouldn't even call it a project. That's a poor term. People decided to take these domains and start putting emojis, and some people started putting ASCII art, and some people started just kind of playing with this technology. So already within like 3 months of the ability to create kind of human expression as non-fungible tokens and tokenize that on a blockchain, people were uploading emojis and creating ASCII art. So what you're looking at here is a puny code, which is basically just an encoding standard that allows you to take a bunch of kind of text that arbitrarily doesn't mean anything, but once it's interpreted and compiled by a computer, it creates a shape like this. So this is obviously just a caution emoji, but that emoji is interesting because what's actually stored on chain is not, you obviously can't store exactly an emoji like that. So there's a puny code that represents that. And as we're looking back as historians, it's an interesting thing. It's just to me, it's quite interesting that people are going to go onto this technology and start creating ASCII art in the domains and start uploading emojis and things like this. It just tells me that people are already experimenting and naturally wanting to use this technology, no matter what form it comes in. People are wanting to upload kind of little primitive versions of art on this, and you'll see this trend in pretty much every room we go into. Artists and people who are creatives want to tokenize their creations. Like they want to tokenize and own their creations and put it on a blockchain. Apparently, like this is just a natural human tendency that has emerged, and it's going to be in every room that we visit today. White Rabbit, what about puny codes is important to you?
Yeah, look, pretty much exactly what you said. This was the next evolutionary step, where people tried to put little bits of art, on this Namecoin blockchain, and make it, effectively non-fungible. This was done, many of them with intention, and so we're seeing another step forward toward where we are today and where we'll be in the future in this next sort of iteration of what occurred and how people started to use Namecoin creatively. Um, with all of these Namecoin ones, there's, sometimes people get caught up in a debate about the chain itself, and it doesn't have the bells and whistles, and it's not as good as Ethereum and this other stuff, and it sort of completely misses the point in my view. It's even in real life collecting, you collect stuff for the significance of its role, not because it's the best. Like you have stamps on pretty inferior paper and all this sort of stuff that people will pay a fortune for and love and will collect. not because the paper's the highest quality or the, like it's the role, it's the nature of what the asset is, which is what makes this sort of stuff significant. So I hear a lot of people talk, oh yeah, but it's hard to trade, or yeah, or it expires, or sort of stuff. Again, the expiry side, you take your own view with the information that's there, but in terms of what it is, it's and as you said before, I don't see this stuff for its functionality. I don't collect this stuff because I think that bit domains or these other stuff is all going to have a function. I collect this stuff because the role it played, and that's done and dusted. They can't fail that anymore. It's done that, and it played an important role in this evolutionary step. So yeah, it's all, for me, it's all part of the journey that's taken us to where we are and where we're going.
Absolutely. All of the friction, all of the things that you might not like about it, that's the varnish on the vase, as I've heard kind of people refer to it. And I definitely share a similar thinking there, White Rabbit. So with that, let's move over. We're going to look at our third and final Namecoin asset for today, and then we're going to move on to chains that y'all are maybe a bit more familiar with here. But yeah, so this is a Twitter egg. So some of you guys might have been on Twitter in the early days. These were the default profile picture. Like if you joined Twitter and you hadn't uploaded your profile picture, you got one of these. And interestingly, you'll probably notice that they're not really on Twitter anymore. This is because they were so popular, people liked them so much, and they almost had a cult following on Twitter, that people were choosing to keep the default rather than upload a PFP. And the people, CEOs of Twitter and whatnot, were not fans of people keeping their default PFPs. It made it look like the platform was like kind of inactive or whatever. So all that is to say, they got rid of those PFPs, but that was kind of a moment in time there. A lot of people that were early on Twitter will definitely have remembered these. But we get to why we care about these from a historical NFT perspective, which is because on Namecoin, so we're now moving forward to 2015 on Namecoin. We're still experimenting, right? People are taking this thing where it's like, okay, we're doing, I want to own google.bit and I want to speculate on this as a domain name. So that makes total sense, right? But people are hacking on this. Once again, people are hacking on top of this. They want to take this technology and do interesting things with it. And in this specific case, so there's this project called One Name. Okay, so someone creates this project and they say, I am going to take these domain names and I'm going to figure out a way to associate metadata and attach metadata to a name. So if that sounds familiar to you at all, this is obviously kind of what an NFT is. An NFT is just a unique ID, and then people attach metadata to it, such as a link to an image or a description. There's any sort of metadata you can attach to an NFT. That's extremely common today. And this is an example of people doing that. And it's interesting because what One Name did was they didn't just attach any images. They said, hey, share a link to your Twitter account. And what we're going to do is we're going to tokenize that. And we're actually going to create an identity for you on Namecoin. So if you want to get the domain name of your name, for example, whiterabbit.bit, you can also now attach your profile picture to that by just linking to Twitter. And to me, this is extremely important because it very clearly illustrates that one of the first things people are doing with these technologies and blockchains from an NFT standpoint is we're tokenizing our identities. And again, identity is a common thread that you're going to see in every room here tonight. We are, it's kind of cringe to say, but it's like humans, we lived in the real world and now we live in the digital world or the metaverse. And we're stepping into that metaverse right now. We're in that in-between transition period right now. And this is a very, very early example of people saying, hey, I really want to own my digital identity and have my face and my name be tokenized on a blockchain. And I have absolute ownership and sovereignty over that identity online. This is obviously a very big deal. We all know how big of a deal PFPs are. And specifically this Twitter ad, there were many profile pictures that got uploaded. It was mostly, people's face from Twitter. And, we're not huge fans of like collecting, a bunch of like people's like actual faces. But what we are fans of collecting and just collectors gravitated to were these 277 different Twitter eggs. And there's 10 different colors, each varying in rarity, that got uploaded. And basically, we as collectors, like we found this interesting, and clearly, when we were looking through one name, we have an interest in collecting on there, and this was one of the more collectible kind of mini collections. It's also important to understand that everything about this like profile picture is kind of like an accident. It's like a little bit unintentional. Nobody ever thought that people would be owning these things for tens of thousands of dollars like a decade later almost. Like that never crossed these people's heads. They were not creating an NFT collection or anything like that. All they were doing was saying, "Hey, I want to put my identity on the blockchain and have ownership over that." And that's what this achieved, and that's what this piece represents here. White Rabbit, do you you're hold one of these as well, I believe. Do you want to talk about what it means to you?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really good explanation, and I think what you're saying there is really critical. People understand because sometimes I think with some of these assets, strawmen can be set up a little bit and knocked down, and it's really important that everyone has a full understanding of this stuff. Yes, eggs did have expiration. Everything on Namecoin does, including the eggs. Really important what Leo said. I think about it being an accident that these were not loaded up as an intentional project. That was not the intention. It was about identity. It was about individuals uploading their profiles to have identity on Namecoin. It was not a project that was meant to be traded, owned. That was not the intention of this. But I think what's important, this is where we've got to zoom out sometimes, and this is as a historian, or in this case, I think the archaeology analogy actually works really well, is that in real life, when you have people digging up, old civilizations and cultures and what was going on, stuff's found, artifacts are found and discovered, and you have these archaeologists or historians that are trying to explain what that artifact meant to the civilization or the culture at the time and why it was significant. Now, you're talking about hairbrushes, you're talking about, bowls and vases, you're talking about a whole bunch of very mundane things that were not made with intention to be significant, were not made with intention to be collectible, but were significant culturally to that people at that time. And I see this sort of stuff very much the same way. Some people described collecting things like these Twitter eggs as like collecting old people's old driver's licenses that have expired and discarded. In some ways, it's a bit like that. But when you dig up those sorts of things in an archaeological sense in real life, they become significant because of what it meant about what was going on with the experimentation or the people or the culture or whatever was going on at the time. And I see it exactly the same way with things like these eggs. It has this beautiful backstory where we love the eggs on Twitter, where Twitter took away the eggs and people sort of had this backlash, but these weren't tokenized as part of that backlash. There was no connection between the two. These were tokenized as an identity thing at the time, but the fact is they were tokenized, and that's the beauty of it. By accident and in retrospect, this collection of eggs now sit there tokenized. Some will claim will expired and so provenance is lost. Others will say no, the provenance is still there. What have you? Again, that's your call in terms of reading the information about that. But again, what's not in dispute is that these eggs were tokenized, and there's a limited number of them, and so that's why you see the principles of supply and demand and a market that gets created for these things. It's up to each individual, but again, for me, this process was another step in this evolution of how non-fungible assets were being used in this very primitive early way. So I just think, yeah, I see people being very open and transparent about all this stuff on Namecoin. I don't see people trying to hide this sort of stuff. It's important people are absolutely informed about it. But I think sometimes people maybe don't see the forest for the trees when they don't zoom out and understand. No, people aren't just collecting it because they think somehow that people have made this collection and been intentional about it. No, it's significant because of, again, the role it played in this bigger evolutionary process, and the fact that it's another step.
Absolutely, White Rabbit. These are great. These are great points you're making here. I want to give a moment because I want to give a moment for people to ask a question if they have one. Just because we're going to move away from Namecoin now, we're going to go to one more piece in this room. Just for the sake of time, we're actually almost an hour in here. We're going to have to move to the next room, but we are going to go to one more piece in this room and then move on. But we are moving on from Namecoin now. So if anybody had a question they wanted to ask, drop it in the chat or ask it now. Otherwise, we're going to jump over in a second here. Okay, then let's, yeah. Okay, it's easy. Is there still a lot of development? Really interesting question. So for a period, there wasn't a whole lot of development, but more recently, there's some, and I don't know how much of this is actually public, but there are two different groups of people actively building in the historical NFT space on top of Namecoin projects. You can, yeah, I actually just honestly don't know what they want me to say about that, but there's two groups of people actively developing on this, and they'll have probably more to share on that at some point over the next 6 months here. And I think it will be they're building infrastructure for collecting these on Namecoin, which is obviously a super important thing. If these things don't have a good user experience, to it's really hard to collect something if it takes you having to like spend 10 hours and sitting down and like sifting through all of this old software, or trying to figure out what how any of this stuff works. It needs to be easy, and that's what they're working on. So yeah, with that, and then yes, this is EggSDAO. That was a great point there. If you ever heard of EggSDAO, it's basically a collective of the holders of these coming together, putting some ETH together, and then basically investing together in various different NFT projects. So, um, and then yeah, beyond collecting the eggs for the DAO members, the mission is it's basically an investing DAO is how I would think about it. People pool money, and then you end up, uh, you know, holding. I think XDAO's made over 50 investments at this point. I can't even speak to all of them, but there's definitely been a few really solid ones in there, and you know the investment is way up since it started a year ago, so that it's doing really well. And if you have more questions about that, you can definitely DM me. I think White Rabbit might be a DAO member as well, so we can definitely kind of guide you there if that's something you're interested in. We are going to move on over here to the Satoshi card, and
Yeah,
specifically,
so
yeah,
I was just going to say, Leo. Yeah, I'm not a DAO member, but yeah, no, we can certainly point you to those who are. And we obviously need more time, Leo, because this is it. Like what we've just gone through is what we would sort of describe as almost the prehistoric assets. Like we barely got to where the evolution's really moved forward. I mean, obviously we're at something really significant here. This is like,
yes.
you know, this is pretty damn awesome. But I'll just probably end that final point to going. So we've really moved from, in many cases, not all cases, but many cases, Namecoin, that unintentional tokenization, unintentional collection sort of stuff, that, and I would just like finish there by saying that it's interesting though, because sometimes that's used as a criticism, but it's interesting when you think about many of the in real life collectibles, how many of those collectible assets and genres were actually never intended to be collected. You're talking coins, stamps, antiques, all these things were actually created for function, and they end up being collectibles. And it's I think we have to zoom out sometimes and realize it's some of these things parallel what happens in real life too.
Absolutely. No, that's such a great point there. Um, so on the Satoshi card here, I want White Rabbit to kind of kick this off. We're looking at Satoshi card. This is a card in the Spells of Genesis project. Can you explain for us the significance of what we're looking at right here? This is obviously a card that's special to both of us.
Oh, you're very kind letting me do that, Leo. This is a truly amazing asset. Yes, of course, I'm an owner, um, but this was June 2015 tokenized, one of the very early ones. Wasn't the first in the series. That's another story, but it was a very significant asset in the sense that Shaban Shame, Spells of Genesis, it created the asset and tokenized it and built it into his game Spells of Genesis, which is still active today, which is absolutely incredible. That it wasn't just another sort of failed early experiment. Like they did so many things right, Spells of Genesis. Beautiful piece of artwork. There's a lot of lore to go into around that as well, which not sure if we'll have time for now as well. But for me, the most significant thing around the Satoshi card is that it was the very first, well, the very oldest asset. There were about three assets at the time, but it's the oldest minted asset that was ever integrated by two independent devs, by two independent games, and it was interoperable between those two games, manifested in a different way from one game to another. And so this was the very first time that had occurred. So basically, you could say it was the very first user centric asset. And when we talk about user centric, we're talking about where the world is going in terms of digital ownership, and that is we're talking metaverse. And a lot of people think metaverse, that's 3D, it's AR, it's VR, all that sort of stuff. And I have a very strong view that metaverse doesn't mean any of those things. Metaverse can be 2D, 1D, or 3D. It's not actually the visual forum of what it is that, or even the location based aspect of what simulations are that make the metaverse. What makes something a metaverse is the fact that it follows the user. It's a digital experience that isn't locked to one platform. It's one that actually can be taken from one platform to another, and in the future it'll be taken to many, many, many platforms. And it breaks this silo between digital experiences. There's analogies that are given, like you buy a car in real life and you get told, yeah, it's a great car, but you can't drive it out of the yard. It's ridiculous thinking. But that's how our digital experiences to date have taught us to live, and we're quite comfortable with it because we don't know anything different. You put thousands of hours and lots of money into buying skins in a game, you get tired of the game, you have to leave it on the gaming server. Future generations will they'll laugh at that. That's ridiculous thinking, because we've barely scratched the surface of the digital age. And this technology that we have now with digital ownership, with tokenization of assets, and the potential for interoperability, which now we have a whole lot of activity in the space in this building phase, that's occurring. It's going to change how we interact in a digital sense. This was the very first asset amongst two other CNP cards, Saratobi card, that Shaban Shame collaborated with Christian Moss with the Saratobi game. And this is where it all began, in that very, very early state of innovation. So it blows my mind just how innovative they were, what they did at the time. But this is one of the first museums, first of many, many museums that I think we will see this card in, because of its significance to the entire future space that is in development as we speak.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better, White Rabbit. I think one thing I want to point out about this that a lot of people get thrown off by is that the story that White Rabbit just told there of these two independent games having this asset where, you know, it's native to Spells of Genesis, which is this blockchain card game, but then Christian comes along and integrates it into his iOS play to earn game. And what he basically does is he says, hey, if you hold this asset, you can use it in my game, even though I didn't create it for this project. He wanted to steal the users over from Spells of Genesis, and he admits this. It was kind of a marketing move. And that's just really fascinating when you think about how the future of these metaverses and how the future of digital objects on the internet are going to work. Hopefully, the kind of dream is it's an open space and these objects move around with us from one experience to another. The instance of this being added to Saratobi was the first instance that we know of that happening, which is why this is very significant to a lot of people. It also happens to be the first crypto art depiction of Satoshi, right? So it's this very early piece of art as well, as along with being in this early first version of what a blockchain game is. But the thing that throws people off that I was mentioning was in Saratobi, when you use this card, it has a different piece of artwork. Christian's wife created this pixel art version of Saratobi card. And a lot of people see that and are like, oh, like, how do I own the pixel art one? Or how do I own this one? And that kind of misses the point. And it's easy to miss the point. And I understand why people miss the point. But those two pieces of art represent the same piece. Anybody can take an NFT, the underlying asset, and put it in their experience and create new art for it and make it unlock something new and change what it is and build on top of that, right? We're just imbuing this original image onto it to create this kind of spirit of the token. But this underlying token is just a unique identifier that is transferable. And we're imbuing this idea of a piece of art or an image on top of that. And any number of people in the future can do that. It is a composable, interoperable asset that is permissionless. So if I right now talk to Brian and was like, hey, let's get the dev team and I see Brian jumping. Let's get the dev team and let's make it so that if you hold this card in your wallet, that when you come into Simulacra, I can have a hood on. And it's going to be like a 3D hood, and I'm going to be a 3D version of Satoshi card. that is totally fair game. Like, this asset is fair game for people to do that with. Yuga Labs, everybody knows Yuga Labs, the huge Web3 company. This is exactly what they're doing with CryptoPunks. So CryptoPunks used to have nothing to do with Larva Lab. They had to do with Larva Labs, not Yuga Labs. And Yuga Labs said, we're going to build this huge metaverse the other side, and we're going to integrate your CryptoPunk. So if you're in our metaverse with the CryptoPunk, you come in and we're going to have a 3D version of your CryptoPunk ready for you. So to me, what that is that's taking the original creation that Matt and John from Larva Labs made, which is just this, very tiny 24 by 24 pixel art face, and they're creating a second piece of art for that, a 3D version it'll look very different, honestly. Like, you'll definitely see that it's like there's similarities, and you'll recognize that was your CryptoPunk, but it's a 3D version with a lot of different things added to it. That is what we're talking about here. I don't think the future of this space is you just buy your NFT and you just look at the original image forever. I think the future is you walk around in these 3D spaces with a kind of 3D version of that CryptoPunk or that asset. And you can look different in various different spaces based on how the creator of that space wants you to appear in that aesthetic style. So this is interoperability. This is a huge deal, being able to take your assets with you from one experience to another. It all started here with Satoshi Card back in 2015. And with that, we're going to move on over into 2016 and 2017 now, and talk about, I believe there's some Saratobi. So that game I was referring to, there's some assets from Saratobi in this next room that we'll hop over to. So join us over in the next room. All right, I'll let everyone make their way over here. We've got a few stragglers back there. So yeah, this is the Ninja Suit and the STB Nimbus. So let's just kind of talk about the Ninja Suit here very quickly. So the Ninja Suit is the first asset native to that game Saratobi that we were talking about. And this is that pixel art style that I was mentioning, right? So imagine a Satoshi card, but in this pixel art style. This is the art. You play this blockchain game on iOS, where you can still do it today. Christian actually kind of revamped the game and made it compatible with Lightning Network. You're basically a little monkey, Saratobi. This is the first ape NFT, by the way. And you swing through this vine through the forest, and the further you go, the more points you'll earn, and that'll actually convert. Like, you're literally earning little dustings of Bitcoin. So you're actually earning Bitcoin. Like, you can go to the App Store today, type in Saratobi, and go earn Bitcoin by playing this game, and it will literally, real Bitcoin sats will appear in your wallet a few minutes later. It's a pretty magical experience. This is also the first NFT skin. So when you had this power up in the game, it would put this little ninja on top of Saratobi. Otherwise, it's just kind of a naked looking monkey. So that's Ninja Suit. It's the first asset native to Saratobi, and there's only 200 of them. White Rabbit, where are you? Yeah, White Rabbit.
Yeah,
do you want to talk about Saratobi at all? You've obviously gotten to talk to Christian some. Anything you want to just kind of add to the story?
Look, I won't add too much because I know there's lots of things to get to, but just agree with everything. Christian Moss is an amazing developer and the nicest guy. Same as Shaban. These guys are so down to earth. They're not put up on pedestals, but they've done world changing stuff in this early period of innovation. And again, it amazes me how well they did it so early as well. It wasn't just rubbish that is now useless. All these stuff's just still operable, still being done. They're still developing. Amazing innovators and amazing people. So no, I love these assets and love the projects and the people behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Quantum was just saying Christian's going to be here next month to basically have a conversation much more in depth on Saratobi, and that'll be super exciting. He's up to all.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear that as well. Nice work, Quantum XOAO, getting that. With that, we're gonna turn around here a little bit and just walk over to a card that I'm sure this is a piece of art that I think a lot of people have probably seen before. Here we're looking at this green looking Pepe on the wall. So White Rabbit, do you want to explain what is a rare Pepe and what are we looking at?
Oh wow. Okay.
Maybe what
That's
is a Pepe? Like I don't know. Some people might not even know what a Pepe is.
Yeah, Pepe. So the green frogs you see, the internet meme. It's often called the Mickey Mouse of the internet. It's like the biggest internet meme in the world. There's a whole big backstory to it, and we don't have time for it all now. But oh my goodness, this asset is so basically given the preeminent place of really being in many cases the birth of the global crypto art market. And the reason for that is this is 2016. It was what Robness also describes as the really is probably the first instance in many ways, bar some of the early experimental stuff maybe that's occurred, but the sort of the first instance of civilian art. So obviously we talked about Spells of Genesis. That was a company that launched those assets and things that came before Rare Peppies. But the Rare Peppy and this Nakamoto Peppy was inspired by the Satoshi card, and it was the first time sort of as a community people could mint, and it was sort of curated into a collection that grew and grew. But it was pretty open. It was lightly curated, just making sure only good stuff was in there. None of the sort of hateful stuff, which sadly was commandeered by the alt right at one point in terms of the Peppy form and the Peppy image, which was never how it was intended by Matt Fury, the original creator of Peppies, through his comics and his illustrations. But it took a life of its own, to a very large degree, has been claimed back. But the Rare Peppy project was this beautiful Peppy loving community that just very tongue in cheek. Basically did a range of different artworks involving Peppies, and it was curated into a collection. And and the Nakamoto Rare Peppy, and I know you had a space only a week ago, Leo, with some of the OGs in in this project, and that's definitely the best way to do it. I think there definitely should be a Rare Peppy museum visit, with all the OGs to come and talk in depth about this project, because it is truly groundbreaking. This asset is pretty preeminent, and you have the OGs of OGs. So you have artists like Matt Kane, who has produced sort of tribute assets to the Nakamoto Rare Peppy, because he was inspired to become a crypto artist because of what he saw in terms of this project and the sale that occurred with the Homer Peppy, which came out of this project, which inspired me to say, hey, there's actually a market in digital assets, which was obviously at the time hadn't really gone anywhere, and this really um, inspired people to understand what was possible. But this is the first card in the entire series. There's 1,774 rare peppies, different rare peppies. Each one has a different rarity. Some very rare, down to even one of ones. A very small handful of those, and others with more zeros than I even know what the number is, because that's just what they did. They were just this really fun-loving, tongue-in-cheek community. They did crazy stuff. They had a lot of fun. It was like a big family, lots of infights and fun, really. But this was the first asset that started it all. It was created by a mystical character named Mike. No one really knows the true identity of Mike. He's still active today. Um, Unlike Satoshi, he didn't completely disappear. He's still around, but he was the creator of the Nakamoto Red Peppy. But no one really knows exactly who he really is. Um, but you'll hear this called the 300 Club, or maybe the 299 Club, because one was burned by another fanatical Rare Peppy lover, as a sacrifice to Keck, who believe maybe on the other side, which we probably do need to pay our respects to. And This card, you'll see a lot of people looking for this card because of its role. And I did a tweet about this just yesterday. Um, when you zoom out, because a lot of people take issue with all these derivatives of punks and all these other things, all these derivatives that spin off from these original assets, because of the role that this card played in launching the global crypto art market and everything that it inspired, including punks themselves, came after this. Um, on one level, you can go, everything actually that has come now has been a derivative of a rare peppy, because it really was the first project that really, gave some real global, uh, I guess, scale to collecting and to creating and digital assets. Spells of Genesis inspired it, but it was a smaller group, and this sort of, helped it take flight. So yeah, a really really cool asset, really cool history and lore. And the beauty of that is there's so many different rare peppies. If you jump on there, and we need to make sure there's some links there for those that are not familiar. This is all tokenized to Bitcoin, mind you. That's a big topic at the moment. And this is genuinely, it's in the op return field on the Bitcoin blockchain, and so is an important history that sits behind all of this.
Yeah, as Quantum just shared, there's a site pepe.wtf. It's a great way to go learn about more about rare pepes, and they have a great explorer because there's obviously 1,774 cards. It's a lot to wrap your head around, and their explorer does a really good job of kind of breaking that down and giving you an easy experience to understand these various different cards in the collection. It's a pretty massive collection. But yeah, this is the first of those cards. And obviously, as White Rabbit kind of mentioned, like memes are kind of a big deal. They're a hot topic in the Ethereum space, NFT space today. And that all traces back to Rare Pepes, right? Rare Pepes pioneered this model of having a collection of many different artists, and you get an artist to come on, and then they create a piece, and then it's a ERC 1155 style, trading card style, semi fungible, whatever you want to call it. It's basically duplicates of the same card, but then there's many cards in the collection. This is obviously what 6529's collection is doing. Kazomo is also doing this. Satoshi's doing this. There's a bunch of people creating these meme collections, and they're all giving a tip of the hat in one way or another to Rare Pepes, whether it's by making the supply of the cards 300. That's the same as this Rare Pepe card. That's a tip of the hat. It's paying homage. Or, the most valuable card in 6529's, the memes collection, is the Freedom Nakamoto, which actually it's kind of a derivative of this Nakamoto card. It takes it and depicts it in a slightly different way. And it's interesting because that Satoshi card we were looking at just about 10 minutes ago, this was inspired by Satoshi card, and Rare Pepes, basically generally saw the idea of, okay, like tokenized trading cards from Spells of Genesis in a game, we're going to do that with art. So you can actually trace the lineage and literally see in the art the influence of Satoshi card to Nakamoto card to these new meme collections on Ethereum. And then those new meme collections on Ethereum are, rememing the Freedom Nakamoto card. So this is not like Satoshi and like the artwork of Satoshi card and Nakamoto card has been carried forward and is kind of getting a new light and being brought to a new audience of people through all of these very popular influencers creating their meme collections. So just a fascinating new development. And I love that we can kind of come here and gather around the OG project that started this whole trend that everybody has been inspired by. With that, we're going to turn our attention to the left here. So let's walk over to these punks. So these are some V1 and V2 crypto punks here. So what we're looking at is CryptoPunks there's multiple contracts of CryptoPunks for people who don't know. I assume most people are aware of CryptoPunks. They're the most valuable NFT collection. Maybe they go back and forth with Bored Ape Yacht Club. But yeah, basically these guys, Matt and John, back in 2017, they tokenized these 10,000 generative PFP pixel art collectible kind of faces. And the idea there was, and the thinking's actually changed a little bit on this, but the what happened there was, as far as we're aware today, because they don't talk a whole lot about their inspiration ever, but they worked for Google in a project called Androidify in 2011, where there's this like Android kind of this cute little Android robot avatar that is, I'm sure people have seen before. It's for the Android operating system. And they were hired by Google to take that Android robot and create a generative avatar app on Android. And they spent like a year of their life building this experience for Android users where they could go into an app, and then create this kind of randomized version of themselves of uh, this like custom Android kind of cute little character. And all of these traits that you see in punks, right? The 3D glasses, the all these different things. These were available on Androidify. So of course this was Web 2. It wasn't like a Web 3 project, but what was interesting about that is that was their testing ground. That was like their sandbox for CryptoPunks. So that's clearly how they had the experience with, they saw all these uh, different users of Android going in, creating this avatar, creating this digital identity for themselves, and then uploading them as PFPs on Twitter. And to me, when I've looked at this now, this is pretty clearly what was going on with CryptoPunks. They wanted to take that idea and then they wanted to take it a step further and tokenize that and allow you to own that. And to this day, these are some of the most significant pieces and most iconic pieces of crypto art simply because they were ahead of their time in so many different ways. I mean, literally, the term 10K PFP, this is ubiquitous. This is kind of the largest thing in the NFT space. We're all in these different communities. Crypto Skulls, that we'll get to in a second, was deeply inspired by this. Alex was, in love with CryptoPunks and wanted to create a collection inspired by it. And we're all in these PFP communities today. I'm pretty sure everyone here probably owns a PFP of some sort or another to represent their digital identity. And CryptoPunks really kicked that off, and they did it in a major way. Matt and John clearly had an understanding of, somewhat where this was heading, because it was just very, you don't end up generating 10,000 tokenized faces like this with not having some kind of basic intuition into what is going on here with tokenizing our identities. White Rabbit, do you want to talk anything about maybe like the V1s and the V2s and maybe what that difference there means to you, and anything else about the CryptoPunks artwork?
Oh, look, I mean, obviously, CryptoPunks need little introduction in terms of, they're obviously amazing. They've become almost the face of NFTs, and have a really important spot in history. I'll probably just say about the V1s, V2s. Again, it's one of those ones that can come up as controversial at times. You have sometimes, people who go, "Oh, the V1s aren't valuable. They're not the real thing," all that sort of stuff. And there's a few projects with V1s and V2s, and I'll just say again, it depends on the perspective you come from. If you're coming from a historical perspective, I think what's really fascinating in this whole space and the evolution of this space is that the very early experimenters with this new blockchain technology, I see it almost like, I don't know. It's like they've picked up a weapon that's too powerful for them to wield. It's like, they picked it up not realizing how powerful it was. They took a few shots, the kickback knocked them over, and we see some of these very early projects where they used the technology, got it slightly wrong, wanted to amend it, but didn't realize that once you give something life on the blockchain, it lives forever. And that's what's occurred with a few of these early projects. Whether that's Ethereum was the case, and now that the various versions have been embraced in that. Whether that's CryptoPunks, they had the first version, they had to sort of then release another, which but and even the rocks, there was one that, although some of those early contracts sometimes have problems and people need to be aware of those as well. But from a historical perspective, in my view, that's part of the rich history of this evolving technology. That was part of the learning curve. That was part of the experience and learning of this decentralized technology, which was brand new to the world. And so, if those things, as part of those early experiments, are now collectible, they're now limited in supply, and therefore subject to market forces, it makes sense that people are going to want to own a piece of that evolutionary process. And so I think it's part of the story. And as much as I sadly don't own a V1, I'm very terribly sad about that. It's something I've wanted, but I didn't get it on early enough. Didn't listen to Leo when you're talking about them. Didn't listen to the few people in the Discord, and just jump on those things. It ran away from me a little bit. I have a V2, but I would equally love a V1 because it's part of the historical journey. I don't see V1s and V2s in any of those projects in competition. I don't see like, oh, well, that's earlier, so it's more significant. I see them both being part of the historical story. And so, the V2s clearly have a important role, because they're the ones that have been I guess the future life of the project, and by the creators, and given that designation. But the V1s, you can't pretend they don't exist. They were still part of the story and part of the evolution. So, that's I guess that's my general take on V1s, V2s on any project. That's the beauty of the technology. Once given life, they live forever.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be two sets of 10,000 CryptoPunks forever as long as Ethereum's running. So it makes sense that to started collectors, they're going to want to collect, both of those. Yeah, I think that's kind of it. We're gonna move on a little bit more here. I do want to point out that we're now on Ethereum, so we've jumped over the rare Pepes and Spells of Genesis that was on Bitcoin. We're now moving over to 2017 on Ethereum, and there were a few other early NFT kind of projects and experiments on Ethereum: Pixel Map, Etheria, Lineage. I just want to kind of give those shout outs on Ethereum, but we are in 2017, summer of 2017 here, June 2017, and moving forward on this timeline pretty quickly, already about 7 years in. Just in the Pepe kind of mythology, this is Lord Keck is an important character and one of the very quite valuable. I think there's one for sale for like $1.5 million right now. There's only 9 of them. Um, that's just it's pretty cool that we have a crypto school holder that has a full one of these and was able to allow us to display that. That was really neat. For the sake of time here, we are passing some curio cards, a very early example of taking crypto art and doing that on Ethereum. It's very much in the kind of spirit of like rare Pepes. We're going to do tokenized trading cards of crypto art with artists and empowering artists. It was a project that was doing that on Ethereum. We've got some more rooms here to go to, though, so we're going to kind of keep moving forward. And yeah, be ruined. If you meet Robness, he will give you a fraction of WordCack if he respects you. Yeah, Robness is the creative of WordCack and also fan of talking in all caps on Twitter. If you've ever been fortunate enough to see one of his tweets, he only talks in caps. Yeah, so let's move on further here. We're going to walk out on the back patio and make our way over to 2017. All right. So this is the 2017-2018 room. So we're continuing on Ethereum now. Pretty much everything in this room is going to be Ethereum, and everything moving forward in the museum is going to be on Ethereum, right? The NFT movement really took over on Ethereum. And obviously, like most of us, probably the majority of NFTs that we hold are on Ethereum. This is the kind of home of the NFT kind of modern movement today is on Ethereum. So everything we see going forward is going to be Ethereum. So if we look to our left here, this is Mooncats. Kind of ignore the accessories a little bit, just because those were not the original art. These are they're very fun additions that people added to their Mooncats later with this new wrapper contract. And what's interesting about Mooncats is, and this is something that's kind of I'm not sure how many people are aware of this, but when you minted a CryptoPunk, okay, you could go on there and there would be 10,000 CryptoPunks. And if it wasn't claimed, you could claim it. And you could see all 10,000 CryptoPunks. So, of course, what happens is this guy Stray Bets, some of you might have met him. He went and claimed like 7 of the aliens. Okay. So you could just claim the absolute rarest CryptoPunks very easily. And this is kind of a flaw in the way CryptoPunks were minted in a way, because it's not like super ideal to allow people to get there first and then claim like all of the rarest asset. That's like obviously not a super ideal situation. Mooncats kind of innovated a little bit here by making it kind of harder to do that. So essentially what Mooncats did is they allowed for this off-chain mining of Mooncats. So you actually had to spend some gas to mine your Mooncat. And in that way, there was like all these random versions of generated Mooncats that you could kind of sift through. And when you found one that you liked, you could go and mine that mooncat. And they're adding just basically a level of on-chain aspect to that minting of generative art. And of course, nowadays, if you've ever had the experience of minting on art blocks, it's completely the whole process is on chain. It's completely randomized. It's very fair. Nobody knows what they're going to get because you actually have to go and mint, and then the Ethereum blockchain will tell you what you have, and nobody knows what the art's going to look like. That is the kind of final version of this like generative concept, right? Where everything's going to be done on chain fairly and randomly. CryptoPunks and Mooncats are early examples where people are kind of trying to figure out how to do this generative art, right? And for people who don't know, like maybe White Rabbit, can you just explain like what does generative mean from like an art standpoint?
Oh, you're pushing me to a space that's not my area of expertise.
Well, I can't. I'm not going to be able to answer it super well either. So I figured I would toss it over to you and see if you had like a good answer.
No, I don't really. I mean, I have a pretty pedestrian sort of answer to that, but basically, it's the utilization of a bunch of algorithms to randomly generate artwork through the code. And there's some talk about when that occurs. You know, if it occurs sort of automatically as part of it, or if it occurs beforehand and then they're tokenized. And there's a lot of preeminence put on those that are generated and minted at that time. But I'm far from an expert on generative art. And so if there's another expert in the room, I'd tip my hat to them to explain the nuances of that.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll have a event focused specifically on some generative art. Obviously, a very important innovation that has kind of found its home natively on blockchains, which is really cool. It's the first time art is very the kind of home base of that movement is in this NFT space on blockchains. That's a very special thing that's been able to occur. Obviously, digital artists don't necessarily have to use blockchains, but generative artists actually there's a technical advantage to using a blockchain to make the home for your artwork. So moving along a little bit here, if you look really quickly, this is the ether rock that White Rabbit was talking a little bit about. There's just 100 of these clip art rocks that were minted in 2017. Okay, so again, not the most big brain project ever, but it's scarce. There's only 100 of them, and it's early. That's really all you needed in 2017 to create something valuable. There were so few people doing this that if you created an NFT in 2017, you are one of those 25 projects. Of course, collectors are going to want to collect that because there's so few of them. So that was the ether rock. And then moving a little bit along here to digital zones. This is that other asset that we were talking about in the auditorium room. So this is a representation that Mitchell created in 2021 of the digital zone. It's interesting because the digital zone actually has no artwork. There is no JPEG. There is no visual component to a digital zone. This is the wrapper, okay, that was created. So the reason a lot of these NFTs that are old need a wrapper is because they predate the ERC 721 standard, which is basically the modern standard that allows you to show up on marketplaces and allows art to show up in galleries like this. Okay, without knowing what to expect, computer code can't interpret what an NFT is trying to tell it, because these are all custom. Every NFT before CryptoKitties was a very custom, just kind of hacked together. Like nobody was sharing information with each other. They were all just creating this unique NFT implementation. And that obviously makes it really hard to integrate when you have to build a custom solution for every NFT. So the ERC 721 standard comes along, and we'll get to that in a second with CryptoKitties, and kind of fixes that problem. So, but yeah, this digital zone is a very early piece of conceptual art. And in my opinion, very important specifically because it's a piece of art that actually leverages the smart contract. It leverages the ability to like everybody knows, and they had figured out by this point in time that you can take a piece of digital art and associate it with a token. That makes sense. We're going to have a link that goes to a piece of digital art that a digital artist made. That's awesome. That makes total sense. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't really take advantage of the innovation of these general purpose blockchains with smart contracts, right? So Mitchell actually coded into the smart contract the art. And the experience of owning a digital zone is extremely important. Mitchell released this 34-page, he calls it the blue paper. He released that alongside with digital zones in 2017. And it's important because the experience of minting the art is very important to the actual conceptual art itself. And then there's a kind of a life cycle to a digital zone. So yes, you can own the digital zone and there is no image. So what we're looking at now is just that wrapper image, like I mentioned. So it's just this imbued kind of color of blue that Mitchell describes in this blue paper. But you can't actually see it on chain. There is no JPEG of this color of blue. You just have to imagine it in your head. And what you have to do is, so yes, you own this asset, but you don't necessarily own the piece of art. You own the ability to own the piece of art. And you own the piece of art, you truly own it by calling a ritual function on one of these 101 digital zones. So you take your digital zone, you call the ritual function, and that is going to burn your digital zone forever. Okay. And only in this way can you truly experience the art and experience what it means to own an asset financially on a blockchain and own a piece of art financially, and then own the piece of art with no financial aspect tied to it. Okay. And this is an experience you can only have by calling the ritual function. To date, only one person has done that, Receipt Burner. And that's a whole nother story there. But yeah, it's a very special piece to me. I found this project, came across this project about 2 years ago, and got to know Mitchell. He's an incredible artist, and he's still releasing art in the space. And I would highly recommend going and following Mitchell. He's a really great guy, and this is a just very thoughtful early example. When we're contrasting it to EtherRock, this is kind of the yin to the yang of EtherRock. This is a quite complex piece of art where you do need to go read this 34-page PDF to fully understand what's going on. We're now going to turn to Dada here, Creeps and Weirdos, and then that'll probably be the last. We'll do CryptoKitties after this. But yeah, so White Rabbit, you've gotten to know some of the founders of Power Dada and this Creeps and Weirdos collection, and they actually hosted this amazing historical NFT kind of OGs meetup in Barcelona, Spain. So I think maybe you would be a good person to kind of tackle the Creeps and Weirdos collection.
Yeah, thanks, Leo. Yeah, I've absolutely had the pleasure to get to know this bunch and just the incredible work that they do and are still doing. And I know there's others in the room that know them quite well. So I put out an opportunity to step up and have a chat, but I know that many prefer not to. Um, this is an amazing project. Firstly, starting with its groundbreaking nature in terms of this was the first project to integrate royalties into the smart contracts of the art. And so this is where it's when you think about the repercussions of that and the ripple effect of that across the crypto art market, you sort of get a sense of why this has its own important place in history as a collection. There was a lot of collaboration with Matt and John in terms of the crypto punks that came shortly after that project, and there was assistance provided there with the contracts that were then evolved further to embed these royalties in. So Bayer and Judy who led the project, and there was about I think they sourced about 30 artists that contributed to about 108 unique artworks were developed in this visual conversation that occurred, and then these works were tokenized to Ethereum. So it's sort of one of those ones that the impact that this crypto art and the case of royalties has had for many artists and collectors now since the advent of crypto art, and so you trace it back here. So it's a very significant, again, another milestone or watershed project. On my timeline, you'll see, for those who've looked at it, you'll see these different projects where I see them all as being very significant because of the age period they're in and the rarity of the amount of projects that are actually in it between that 2011 to 2017 period. I think there are other significant projects after that time as well, and you can extend that, 2018, 19. These are also significant projects but you'll see I put a flame against just a few of the projects on that timeline that I think have a sort of a watershed contribution to history, and this is one of them. I would say a highly overlooked project, and one of those ones that if you do your homework on it and you learn about where these are and what's happened with this project, I think it's a real opportunity to collect, because not there's different rarities with the different pieces and the like, and sure, some of them are going to be out of reach, but many aren't as well. And there's some beautiful artwork, and some, and I love it, the fact that each one again has its own artists that have contributed to it along the way, and they're still very active today. So well worth a look at that project. And yeah. It's as Leo said, really involved in the historic NFT scene in terms of understanding where we've come from.
Yeah, absolutely. You can just tell they're good people, and they are asking, like, they're having interesting conversations. That you can tell they're thinking about a lot of this at the theoretical level, and I don't see a lot of those conversations happening, to be honest. So I'm glad that they're kind of having those. And yeah, definitely a project that's kind of, I would say, like, underrated. Like, most people just aren't aware of it. So one of those projects, definitely worth checking out. If we're gonna now turn to the left here and shift our attention to CryptoKitties, another project that probably people have heard of. CryptoKitties are, of course, the project created by Dapper Labs in 2017, November 2017, that introduced the ERC 721 standard. Okay, so this guy Dieter Shirley, a few months prior, who's one of the founders of CryptoKitties, wrote on GitHub a kind of rough specification for an NFT standard that all NFTs could follow, that would allow us to then build marketplaces that worked with all NFTs and have our NFTs transfer with us to different experiences because they all match a predictable same specification. That, of course, became a huge kind of deal and innovation that nearly every NFT project today is built on. 1155 is picking up steam some, but for the most part, ERC 721 still reigns supreme. And that all started with CryptoKitties and the first kind of iteration of that standard. Zoo Squares, several months later, had the first iteration of the final implementation of that once it was official. But CryptoKitties introduced the first iteration of that standard. Interestingly, this is how I got into NFTs, was breeding these in this game. So the way CryptoKitties works is the contract releases these Gen Zero kitties, and then you can buy them off a Dutch auction. And then if you get two cats, you can breed them together and create another cat. So to date, there's like 2 million cats. There's just been a lot of breeding, and the kind of common thing I hear is, oh, like, CryptoKitties are infinite supply. You can't really collect them. They can't store value. And there is a little bit of truth to that. Like, you don't want to just buy any CryptoKitty, because that is correct. You can literally just breed, millions more CryptoKitties, right? But there are niches to this collection that are very important, in my opinion. So, for example, the first 100 CryptoKitties are considered to be the founder CryptoKitties. And these are like the first 100 ERC 721 tokens. And what we're looking at here, I'm not sure which token number this is, but my guess is it's probably like a Gen Zero CryptoKitty, which is one of those first 50,000 that are birthed by the contract and have no parents. So yeah, Dapper Labs created this kind of magical onboarding experience. So many different people in the space today that have gone on to build all these, just, I don't know, like, basically the NFT space today is like kind of built by people who played CryptoKitties and were like, hey, we need to do something with NFTs. So like the founders of Yuga Labs, for example, they bred CryptoKitties and played this game. The founders of OpenSea said, hey, we need to make a marketplace for assets like these CryptoKitties. So CryptoKitties, I think, in my opinion, when I look at the history of NFTs, I look at everything as before or after this moment of CryptoKitties. And before the moment of CryptoKitties, there was no term NFT really. There was basically nobody in the space, just nobody cared. And then after CryptoKitties, because these things were trading for hundreds of thousands of dollars and getting featured on large, news outlets and websites, and you had 100,000 people like on Ethereum playing these, you end up with this moment that kind of catalyzes the capital to flow in, the founders to come in and build the NFT space that we have today. And I definitely kind of attribute a lot to CryptoKitties for creating that viral moment there in December 2017. White Rabbit, do you want to add anything on CryptoKitties here?
Oh, no, look, I wouldn't add too much. Yeah, iconic project. Really caught the imagination. Really, I think of in the entire space, as well as caused a lot of pain to Ethereum when it slowed everything down, and suddenly everyone took notice, going, "What's going on here?" So I remember at the time trying to grab a kitty, didn't have much clue about how to do it, and yeah, an amazing project. Would love to get one of those 0 to 100 ones. They I think they'll forever be highly sought after, but. Yeah, no, really played an important role in the whole evolution of this process.
Sweet. Well, guys, with that, we have one more room to go to here. We're going to move into 2018 and 2019 now. So let's make our way over here. All right. And as you see, you walk into here, it kind of frames you on the crypto skulls. And obviously, I'm sure many of the people here are probably crypto skull holders. And this museum was a creation between a collaboration between Simulacra and the Crypto Skulls DAO. And obviously, Crypto Skulls are a project that's special to me as well. So, very thankful that kind of Crypto Skulls has made it a priority, and the DAO has made it a priority to uh, try to educate people about these historical assets. Like the entire point of this museum is to educate people about the history of NFTs that often maybe doesn't get the spotlight of the NFT space because all of the newer mints just get a lot more of excitement on Twitter. So we definitely thank Crypto Skulls DAO for helping to create this space, and Simulacra and the team, Brian, for all their work building this space here. It's been a pleasure to be able to get to work with y'all on this. So with that, I think we should talk about Crypto Skulls very shortly here. Most people are holders here, I would imagine. So not going to go into it too much, but basically, we talked about CryptoPunks, the first 10K PFP project. Obviously, a very big deal for a variety of reasons. But when I'm looking at these projects, what I'm really doing is, yes, I'm looking at how old the project is, but I'm also kind of reconstructing a timeline for a specific niche or category or innovation. So specifically the PFP category, this is the most popular category in the NFT space today. It's clearly gotten product market fit. And I'm thinking about it in terms of, okay, so we know there's CryptoPunks. I know that there's like these Twitter eggs that came before that were like these unintentional kind of PFPs. And then there's Bored Ape Yacht Club. And it's kind of like looking at the timeline and seeing like what is in between. So in this room, we've got two projects that did come between there. So behind us are Pride Punks, which are a derivative of CryptoPunks, where you could basically take your CryptoPunk and wrap it, and this rainbow would appear behind your CryptoPunk. And this is obviously like a derivative in its purest form. It's your CryptoPunk, but it's like slightly different. And it's basically created as like a statement for diversity in Web3. So that's just an interesting project. It was released exactly 1 year after CryptoPunks by Denison. And then Crypto Skulls came in May of 2019, and this guy, he's a Russian developer named Alex Slayer. Some of you might be aware, we've done Twitter Spaces with him. He doesn't speak very much English, so we have a translator, but he is just an incredible individual who was very passionate about several things, and you can totally see it in the art, and you can see how you ended up with Crypto Skulls. So he loves the band Metallica and like heavy metal, and he's a big fan of NFTs and CryptoPunks, and he played the video game Diablo. And when you combine those three things, you end up with these pixel art Crypto Skulls. So Crypto Skulls are just very similar. You can actually go to the website on the Wayback Machine and see that in 2019 when they launched, Alex wrote in the metadata on the website, he says Crypto Skulls